You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way.
Welcome to the party. I'm Owen.
I'm Dave.
I'm Liam.
And I'm Scarr. Or Shane, I guess.
And today, Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, Elden Ring. The whole Souls genre has proved incredibly influential in modern video games. And there have been calls to adapt it to the TRPG space. However, down that route lie pitfalls, both figurative and literal. Down that route lies RPG players having to confront the fact that if you made a genuinely difficult RPG, you would have to, in fact, Git Gud. And I don't think either RPG designers or RPG players are necessarily ready to have that conversation yet. They are not ready to have their inadequacies laid starkly bare.
I think there's a bit of that can be kind of down to the party. Like, you know yourself, we've all kind of run a lot of games and played a lot of games, and you'd run an encounter with one party, and all dice rolls aside, luck obviously plays a factor into it. Some parties, mop the floor with an encounter, just absolutely chew through stuff like it's not there, because they're a well-built group, they optimize and play well together. And there's other groups that absolutely struggle with that same encounter because they aren't. So, I think we already have that. I guess this will be just something that emphasizes that this is a must. Like, even as a GM, yourself, you might be running an encounter and go, this isn't going to be a challenge. I'm going to throw some templates onto these guys, or I'm going to throw in an extra mook or something like that, and vice versa. Then you go, oh, these guys are going to get wiped by this. I'm going to take out a mook. I'm going to, I'll just like write off this bad guy's top 2 spells. It's already something we kind of do to tailor, but I guess it's something that will be intrinsically there in a system.
You're going to have a certain level of this Dark Souls style is inevitably going to be GM dependent. There has to be, there's going to be some stuff that a mechanics setup is going to help with, certainly, but I don't think it's going to be independent of GMing, because there's an awful lot of setup. It's not going to be like the board game, which I'm sure is going to be mentioned a couple of times. That is like, you're not, an RPG session is not going to be set up, line by line, square by square, unless it becomes as massive as D&D and has 57 modules coming out every week, like old school TSR. It's going to be a setup of the GM is going to take guidelines from the game and make a scenario for them. And so there's inevitably going to be GM styling, because an awful lot of the important stuff of Dark Souls is stuff like the setup of an encounter, the tricking the players to going into the middle of the room to get ambushed, or then 3 rooms back putting a tiny little window that if someone just gets the camera just right, they can see the ambush outside that upcoming room, so they're ready for it. That's the kind of setup that you can only put so much GM advice to do that kind of thing in a book or a set of mechanics. There is going to be a certain level of the GM has to be in the mindset of thinking of, well, how do I set up this trick, but also how do I set up ways that they could have thought of it if there had been taking care, as it were.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more than that as well, because I think one of the reasons why, and I haven't played the games, I've only watched a couple of videos of them, but I'm aware the general concept of it is neener. you weren't 100% on your game, and even if you were 100% on your game, you might just get wiped. But part of the reasons why I think that game works, and why I think the board game doesn't work, and why I'd be wary of it in a role-playing game, is that, okay, I want to play that game, or make up a character, bang, I'm in. Character gets killed, back to the start. Off I go. Character gets killed, back to the start. It's all quick, it's all instantaneous. There's no waiting around, there's no faffing around. So, whereas with the board game, there's always kind of set up and reset up, to a degree when you go back to your regen point, and it's not quite as quick. And I think if you're going for that whole easy come, easy go thing, like people won't be. I don't think people will be as invested as they are with a regular RPG, because there is that easy come, easy go nature, which works fine for the computer game, but I don't know it's going to work for a role-playing game.
So, I saw a number of people talking about this, and what they started saying was, my game is an amazing Dark Souls RPG. The setting's the same, it's got the same kind of storytelling, it's all about memory and the loss of memory, and the themes are the same. And that, for me, fundamentally misses the point of Dark Souls. The Dark Souls line of games are skill testers around boss battles, where you need to learn the patterns of the boss and develop a strategy to counter the boss and beat the boss that way. It's a progressive skill game where you basically learn skills by fighting lower level guys, and then when you encounter the boss, you have gone, okay, I know what I'm doing now, I can handle this. Oh god, he does something, he's very good against rolling, so I need to put together a different strategy, we need to parry against this guy. And it's a very particular style of game, and if you're going to do a Dark Souls RPG, core to it is extremely difficult boss battles that you can easily lose. And if you put in boss battles that you can easily lose, you need to find a way for them to resolve incredibly quickly. But deep strategy and tactics needs to matter. Minimum of randomness. And it's got to be all about team play. And there's no RPG that does that terribly well. So you'd have to design a completely new resolution mechanic for an RPG to deal with the fact that the boss attacks you, you have to resolve that attack fully in about 3 seconds. And there are ways of doing that. But, and I had to think about some ways of doing it. But I think that's the challenge. If you want to make a Dark Souls RPG, it has to have incredibly challenging boss battles that in a night you could lose the boss 10 times and it wouldn't destroy your evening. It wouldn't be the entirety of the evening. You'd be able to get it resolved in an hour or 2 hours. Or in a session, you could basically, we fought that guy 15 times.
I mean, is this where we might have to look at some kind of hybrid product? Because I bet the only thing in gaming that I've seen do that kind of thing reasonably well is TCGs.
Yes.
Where you have TCGs, I can't remember what they're called, but where you have, there's an NPC deck. And I mean, it's not a TCG, but Sentinels of the Multiverse was essentially like that, where you've got a boss deck and the deck's doing something. There could be an environment deck going out there as well, doing stuff, and then the players all have their deck, which interacts both with the bad guys and also with the other players as well.
I think
that was quick and snappy,
Yeah, I think it ends up looking like that. I think it has to, because otherwise.
I mean, I've had groups where every in the group was pretty supernumerate, and in terms of doing any amount of quick addition and addition and subtraction, and even division and multiplication, but bam, 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 it's done. But I think we're freaks, so I think most people can't do that kind of quick arithmetic. Certainly to that level, and there are plenty of people who I've gamed with who struggle with it, even just with looking at 66 on the table and just looking at it and going 18. That they struggle with that.
The obvious solution to that, to my mind, would be calculators. Make use of all this technology we have knocking around. And by calculators, I mean the ones we keep with us: phones, tablets. Laptops.
Apps.
As much as some people are opposed to dice rollers, they do certainly allow for that kind of quick totting up.
The thing I'd say though is, if you do basic addition and subtraction for 20 minutes a week as practice in a game like this, you'll get quick at it. You will get quick at it.
I don't know. I mean, it is lack of practice, but
it's lack of practice.
There are people who are dyscalculic. Have dyscalculia.
Calculators.
But
no, just referring back to a point you made, Owen, about randomness. Absolutely agree. You need to minimize that as much as possible. I remember a brilliant example of this in a book. Can't remember the name of the book, but the name of the game they described was Rando Chess, and it's played exactly like chess, except that at the end of each player's turn, they roll 2d6, and if they get if both dice are sixes, then they win the game. And what that does is, even you could have a grandmaster and a complete novice. And the novice has a far, far better chance of winning, than they would have in a game where skill was the only thing that mattered. Randomness favors the weaker party in a situation like that's just ironclad. Like it gives them chances they would not have if it was down to, this player's 10 times as good as them. I don't think dice are necessarily the way to go with a Dark Souls game. From the sounds of it, you'd be talking. I mean, I kind of have a vision of counters, as in like moving different colors of counters around, or like cards. Also, as Liam was pointing out, also come to mind, as in like some sort of physical component or an electronic simulation of a physical component.
I definitely think there would be based about resource management. It would be about, I have a certain number of stamina points and I need to spend so many of them to attack but hold so many in the back to defend, and it would be about when do I risk going for it and doing a big attack versus when do I pull back, try to recover stamina, and if the boss swipes at me, jump out of the way. That would have to think. I don't think there would be zero randomness in a game. I think there would certainly be some ways of creating uncertainty. Like there would be something you could put. Most of the time, you would want there to be prediction, but there is. The thing about it with say Dark Souls is that because you're in this sort of couple second interactions, it's a lot easier in a video game for them to say, the boss is raising this hand of its 17 hands, and that means one of these 3 moves is about to start. And it's randomly determined which one it has, but I have time to see this coming and make a choice of what my reaction is. Do I roll out of the way? Do I roll forward? Or do I make an attack and just tank the damage because it's a small hit? That's the sort of thing. Is just like RPGs are used to having the start of an action and the end of that action being one resolution, and there's very little.
There are games that have exceptions to that, where you do have different phases in combat, but I have never seen that work in a way that didn't slow things down further, and I guess what we've been talking about is that the game needs to be snappy. Like you could have it that the bad guy has a turn, they do their attack, you have a counter phase, then maybe it goes to your attack and they have a counter phase, and you could go like that. But the resolution would have to be super speedy for that to work.
Like, I think you want the resolution of the boss battle to take between 5 and 15 minutes. The entire boss battle. And if it doesn't take 5 or 15 minutes, it can't be that hard. Because if you make it take an hour, you'll get 3 goes at the boss in an evening. Right? If you make it take 15 minutes, 5 to 15 minutes, like, we wiped in 5 minutes. Yeah, okay, let's go again. You could get a bunch of different goes. But it can't be random, because if it's random, you're going to be like, okay,
we just have to keep grinding this until we get lucky.
Until we get lucky. And you don't want that. It's about skill. That's what the Dark Souls game's about. Like, the whole thing, why do people think often people say Git Good is toxic, right? Git Good is not toxic. Git Good can be taken and used in a toxic way, but the core concept is not toxic. If someone says, how do I go in? Because here's where it comes from. People go into the thing and go, I can't beat the X-boss. Every time I try to hit him with my axe, he hits me before I go. What do I do? And the response is, there's a big long screed about weapon speeds and iframes and moving out of the thing, but it boils down to Git Good. Keep practicing, you will get better at it. Executing well enough.
I think in this context, Git Good is fine. There are times when it can be toxic. Like if
absolutely,
if you're in a one horse town or village and there's only one sport and you're not good at that sport, there's only so much training and stuff is going to do for it. Otherwise, you're possibly going to be excluded from the local cat team or football team or whatever it is. But in this case, we have a vast array of computer games available, and if it may just be that in this case, this style of play of Dark Souls isn't for you. Maybe you want to pick a different RPG which has different difficulties and different play styles, and maybe it doesn't expect so much of you.
Yeah, but that will be like
at a different time. Sorry, Owen.
But if you're playing the Dark Souls RPG, it should be tougher than 2 Second Steak. It should be the hardest RPG. Like, it became the lingua franca, which is this is the XXX is the Dark Souls of XXX. Or YYY, Where it became shorthand for saying so. People say stuff like, Cuphead is the Dark Souls of shoot-em-ups now. I will take exception to that one. I will take big exception to that one. I played Project X in the Amiga back in the early 90s. People were not sure there was a level 3. Just saying. People were not sure there was level 3, and everyone was convinced there wasn't a level 4. There were 5 levels. Almost no one got past 2, and the few that did not get past 3. So, it's just that was a legitimately hard game.
Quake on Nightmare was pretty solid too.
Yeah.
The one you had to actually unlock it by taking a different area in the start menu. There was 3 portals for easy, medium, hard, and then there was a secret hidden one you had to go and find Nightmare setting. And it was stuff.
It's been so I played Quake. But yeah, just because we probably should touch on it, there's a lot of games that are claiming to be Dark Souls-like, but they borrow the aesthetics, which is quite a different thing. And it's a lot easier to do, like for starters. And to be fair, those kind of games can be very fun. It can be very fun to be in a grim gothic universe doing grim and gothic things, but from the sounds of it, Dark Souls at its mechanical core is very different to those sort of games as they're generally played.
Because those tend to be like OSR style games based more around the between bosses gameplay of exploration and sort of grinding and finding new spells and equipment. And they tend to be focused more on that aspect of it. And it's a lot easier to do that sort of thing and mix it with the aesthetics. The OSR has this meme of the aesthetics of ruin, that all fantasy OSR should be post-apocalyptic. See previous episode. And that tends to be where these kind of imitators tend to shine, is that they can use lighter OSR-inspired mechanics to do this sort of exploration in a dangerous place. But they don't tend to have the same emphasis on boss runs, as it were. That's much more of a mechanical challenge, because old school D&D doesn't do the big spectacular boss fight well. It tends to do better with sort of quasi tactical, large group management. This is like where it's our team and our hirelings versus this tribe of orcs that are coming out in waves out of a cave, and we need to figure out our defensive strategy and our traps, and when to retreat, when to push, that kind of thing, which is not quite the same as the big spectacular boss fight, which is where people would tend towards more modern games.
Well, I think that can be partially down to that in a lot of iterations of D&D, it could often be easy to lock down one target or creature often with spammy tactics. Be it trip or disarm or counter, not even counter spell, or just getting ready to disrupt spell casting. You just have your wizard sitting on the back going, right, every spellcaster getting hit with magic missile.
Yeah.
Just a thought on one advantage that a tabletop game can have over the original Dark Souls in terms of difficulty, as in having to account for multiple characters coming at this boss, because that also makes the bosses, necessarily having to be that much more difficult in order to compensate if you want the same level of difficulty, because, well, like you're saying, Leah, like, if, people can just spam out a trip attack or something, that boss isn't going to be too tricky. But if you have to do a trip and try to knock them out or stun them at the same time or something, that could be a bit of a challenge.
Like, I look at it and it's really quite difficult for a number of reasons to produce content where the default assumption is that the players fail and then reset and maybe learn something and get a bit better. Because that's not, like, no RPG plays like that. No RPG assumes you're going to win. In fact, or assumes you're going to lose. Most RPGs assume you're going to win. And
closest I can think of is paranoia. Sorry, Owen.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, paranoia has one of the few recovery mechanics. There are games which go, okay, there's a way to respawn. Steamforged Games are putting out a Dark Souls RPG, which I think is very ambitious. And they talked about, if you die, if you hit 0 hit points, it's a 5th ed mod, you die and you go back to the bonfire, and the rest of your party has to fight on without you. So, yeah, we'll see about that. They're still rolling dice. Your hit points are randomly determined before the fight starts. It's, there's a bunch of interesting ideas in there. I'm fascinated by the concept. I don't think they're going to be able to pull it off, but I'm going to pick up the RPG and see if I'm proven wrong.
That's also going to need to be super snappy, because if it's like, hey, you sit there and have no fun for the next hour.
Yeah, it's not good. So
I mean, that can happen anyway in any RPG. That your player gets got, and then roll up and we'll introduce a character after the encounter or next session or something. But I guess if it's intrinsically, we generally don't assume PC death when we're putting together an encounter. We assume that maybe they might get dropped, but we tend to not aim that they're going to get killed. Whereas this would have to. It's going to be an intrinsic part of the game. So if it's not your quick, snappy resolution, then it'd be like, okay, well, you're probably going to sit there. Make sure you bring a book, because you're probably going to spend maybe a third or a half of all games sitting there, twiddling your thumbs.
Do you remember in Guardian or Sentinels of the Multiverse, they had a mechanic where if your character was knocked out, you flipped over your card and you still had something you could contribute.
A minor action, yeah.
Because, it sucked not being there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be a good move to have. For this, if you're having this, because you have this sort of getting to the boss phase of playing, that's the discussion in of itself, whether the point is to optimize that part so you get to the boss with all your resources, or if you're okay with people like scraping the before boss section for XP or items and risking going into boss battle with like only one player and 2 others are on half hit points. Do you want to make that a choice that they make? Or is that complicating matters too much? Because some people...
You see...
Go ahead.
What you're saying there, Shane, is you're saying, is resource management a primary skill? Or is it a secondary skill? Is getting there... Because that's old D&D. How many resources do you get to the big fight with? If you get there with all your fireballs, fight's easy. If you don't get there with all your fireballs because you used them on the other swarms you encountered... Yeah, you don't have that anymore. You hit 20 skeletons. You're like, crap, elf, don't bother fighting these in melee. We'll just fireball them and we'll save our cure light wounds for the boss fight. Like, because that's really what you're saying. Is what skill does Dark Souls test? Like, that's when you're designing the game, you have to make that decision. What skill is it testing? Because once you make that decision, you're going to cut some players out of the game and you're going to bring some other players in. Dave, you have a question or a point?
Yeah, just talk about design and touch on something Shane said earlier about GM advice. And I actually think for a game like Dark Souls, if it's going to be the hardest RPG, it's also going to demand a lot of the GM. It's going to need a lot of advice. And honestly, you'd want to have a very, very good GM guide. Delving I would say delving into the theory of behind why these decisions were made, because I've actually become quite a fan of game designers having sidebars or text in explaining why they've made design decisions, and that helps. I find it helps me a lot to understand. Oh, that's why this rule is important, and that's why it's meant to to act like this. Cool. So I think the GM advice section is going to have to be pretty comprehensive. Like, as in, this shouldn't be just pick up and play. Honestly, because something like this, I think you would need to have a pretty good grounding of how it's going to work before you crack it out.
You might need to strike a balance though, because like your book could become bloated at a certain point. But like we're in the 21st century. It's 2022. We could easily have, okay, this is our nice slim rule book, and then I know certainly if you signed up for the kind of deluxe edition stuff of the current Wolfrup campaign. I'm running out. My mind shouldn't have gone blank. There you go. Yeah. The design diaries where they went through a lot of the rationale, and some of that was just like old school stuff of like, well, this is where this encounter came from, and it was nice kind of background info. But then there's also some detail where they go into like mechanically how things might work, and you could absolutely have the same thing there, where you might have your player book, your GM book, and then you could have like that as a slimmed down one, and then you could have a link to a PDF or to a bunch of journals that detail things and go into things in a lot more detail.
What I will say about this is, just on the topics of GMs, right? This is an incredibly challenging game to GM if you want to do a Dark Souls RPG, because you cannot play easy on the players or you're denying them the experience. And that's difficult because you can't go, okay, guys, I'll nerf this, I'll let you get through this. And the GM advice have to say, no, don't do that. If they're going to fail, they fail. That's it.
Don't fudge dice if you're even using dice.
No, that's why I wouldn't be rolling dice. I would be like, because then the players are going to, like, the thing is, when you get annoyed at Dark Souls, if you've got poor emotional management, you might throw your controller at the screen. You might go on Twitter and verbally abuse the game designer. You might do an angry YouTube rant. Your GM's right in front of you. You can give out to your GM when you lose your temper, and that's not fair on the GM. So I would try to find a way in the mechanics to take the GM as much out of the running of the boss monster as possible. Because the player goes, you've gone for me again. You've focused all your attacks on me. F you, you jerk. You're just trying to kill me. I'm the weakest defense, but the boss targets the guy with the weakest defenses. And in reality, you don't want that. You want the GM to actually be just supervising an AI that goes off, and the GM just goes, guys, it goes off as it goes off. I just resolve it. I just control the targets based on the target priority book. You could actually run this without me if you want. In fact, I'm going to go get a cup of tea. You guys run the next one yourself. And you want that a little bit of distance from the GM and the fact that he's kicked your ass 15 times in a row, because players get salty.
If the thing could run itself, what are you doing there? What's the point?
Well, you're doing the other stuff. You're doing the flavour. You're doing the stuff. You can make some flourishes. You let the GM make a few minor choices, right?
I haven't been practicing my evil laugh.
Absolutely. Careful on that one. Some of the most annoying video games I've ever played had a I win when they beat you, and I was like, ooh, I'm going to throw this mouse through this monitor.
But
that's
increases
silly.
satisfaction when you do beat them, right?
It does. The thing is, when you beat hard group content together as a group, when you manage that, there is an enormous sense of accomplishment. That's the high that keeps people playing Souls games. The feeling, yeah, I got him. There's a genuine high off that. That's why these are very successful games. Elden Ring has been one of the most talked about games and Elden Ring is closest to really weird old D&D. That's what the game's like. You're going around, you're finding these crazy mystic artifacts, these weird spells, these strange items. You're fighting these really whacked out monsters. What's going on? It's actually very close to very old school D&D. In terms of, it's just, but...
Top seller on Steam.
You can pull in players to help you out, other ones to make some fights. There's much more variety of play style in it, which is good, because the other games are kind of like, well, it kind of gets down to swords, guys. Whereas this one, you can be the guy running away on a horse, casting lightning bolts at your bad guy while your jellyfish swamps him. And goes, okay, I'm not going to die. And so there's some different options available. But that's an important part of it, like a skills testing RPG. And what skills are you testing? If you're not doing dice rolling, you're looking at tactics and you're looking at memory. I think that's the two ones you're going to have to channel. And you're going, this is how it's done, guys. And I would consider basically just have the bad guy, start of the combat, shuffles his deck, and then never shuffles his deck again, and deals out 4 players, 4 attacks. And each attack goes in front of a different player. Deal with that. Next round, another 4 attacks. Next round, another 4 attacks. And players are playing out their own attacks or defensive moves, depending on what happens. And what you do is you let the players have a deck as well. And the players, the first round, get to pick 1 card and a roll, and then they drop to their hand size. And then the next round, next time they fight the boss, they get to pick 2 cards and a roll and drop to their hand size until eventually they've got it, okay. His order never changes, so it's always this, and this. And I do this, and I do this, and I do this, and we try and do this, and this, and this. And we keep doing an order. And that's kind of how I attempt doing it. Where it resolves fairly quickly, but it's really challenging. Because you got okay.
Is the role playing? That's the only thing.
The role playing is like, how much role playing do you do in combat, Liam?
That's true.
How much role playing do you do in combat? Realistically, not a huge amount.
Play for speech.
You do it for the other stuff, you know.
So you'd be padding it out in between.
Oh, absolutely.
In between the encounters, you'd be having all the roleplay stuff.
That can't be the whole game. It's too intense.
Yeah.
At the end of it, people go, "Oh God, another boss battle." You know,
I've seen so many times games described as, "Oh, we're doing loads of role playing this session," i.e., not combat.
Yeah.
But yeah, just thinking about the card deck, you could do things with that. You could have 2 decks. You shuffle the first one. And you shuffle the second one. You put, like, the first one is the boss's starting moves, like, getting warmed up. The bottom part is his warmed up, like, moves. Or you could even do something like, this card is going at the bottom after everything else is shuffled. That's his finishing move, which will kill you all, guaranteed.
Yeah.
You have to beat him before then.
Like, what I would do is you have a deck, and you have a finisher at the bottom that kills them all, and they play, and when they mid-phase him, you take that deck, you shuffle it, put it back down, and say, there we go again, guys.
So
ideally, you actually might do 2 decks for that, because then you can preserve the order of the first deck. If they wipe, you have to go back to the first phase again. So you go, okay, bonk, first phase done, there's the second phase. Same cards, different order, let's go.
It's not like this is totally alien as well, though, because I know certainly playing like Gloomhaven. Gloomhaven is a board game. The core resolution mechanic of it is a card game.
Yep.
But to me, when I play it, it feels more like a role-playing game. Even though there's not really any role-playing in it. I guess it's just the nature of it, and you're stepping through it, and there's a scenario, and, there's an ongoing campaign element to it. It feels more like a role-playing game than a board game, even though it's a card game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds well-designed.
That's it. It's a well-designed game. And, I think to do a good Dark Souls game requires a large amount of design ability. You can't just be like, let's reskin 5th Ed. I'm like, reskin 5th Ed? That's what you're going... Like, it's nothing like the game. Like,
I think if you're being very lazy and just going, you're dead, ha ha ha, start again, then you could very easily just reskin 5th Ed. But like you say, if you do want to make it actually about... If the thing you're trying to emulate is this is really hard, get used to it, sunshine.
Yeah.
Then it'll be that easy. But if you do actually want to emulate that, actually you do need to push yourself and learn the mechanics, learn your character, learn the bad guys, and then through doing that, beat it. No, I'd be, maybe they could, but I'd be very skeptical if it could be done with 5th Ed.
Yeah, like it's a really challenging game to design. That's why I'm fascinated by Forge game. I'm going to buy it, and hell, if people want, I'll run it for the adventuring party. We'll see how hard it actually is.
I mean,
I don't think it's going to replicate the feeling the way it should do. But we'll see.
The only thing I could think is if like you had a bigger advantage pool on various things you do, generate an advantage and dip it. But that's purely doing is trying to take out the swing of the D20.
Yeah, that's it. Now they have a function where you basically effectively burn poise becomes your combined hit points and stamina effectively, and you burn poise to modify dice rolls and do other stuff to try and remove some of the luck factor. So they've at least thought about that. So I would take a look. But I think you would need to move away from dice as a core mechanic if you want it to be about skill.
Yeah, dice can work, but I think for it to work, you need a pool, you know, because
you need a bell curve rather than a straight linear
your steep peak becomes, you know, becomes a curve. You know, it's much better in terms of figuring out things. Yeah, like there's not really okay. What's the strategy, guys? Well, I'm gonna get in and I'm gonna try and consistently roll a 16 or better.
I've played with players like that, and I was like, you realise to accomplish what you're about to do, you need to go need 3 actual natural 20s in a row. And then the player did that, and I said, that was terrible. And he said, but it worked. I said, yes, but it shouldn't have. It shouldn't have. It did, I'll grant you, it did, but it shouldn't have. That was a stupid plan.
I do recall one combat encounter being sprung on my party in a Pathfinder campaign where rolled a 20, primary attack, rolled a 20, rolled a nat 19 to confirm it and didn't confirm. So I was like, all right, guys, I'm surrendering.
Yeah.
I have some more thoughts.
Absolutely, Shane. Fire away.
Well, one of the things is to go back to the DM element. Is just like, it can sound like we're suggesting some kind of program or board game setup, but like, ideally, you do still want to be making an RPG at the end, and I do think there's going to have to be a way to essentially have a GM set up a certain counter. Like, there's going to have to be, as I say, as Dave says, GM advice to say, well, how do you make your own monsters? And here are the elements you need to put into monster design. Because if you're making your boss, like, how do you make a boss? Because it'll have examples in the book, obviously, and it'll be the big monsters that you know from the game. But there's only so far you're going to get just by regurgitating the stuff from the game again. You're going to, if you want to have this be a functional RPG, you want to have the GM have some ability to make their own bosses, but without those bosses becoming silly easy or unrunnable. You have
I do. I just have a point directly in response to that one. I think the best boss battles in RPGs at the moment are probably in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, because the way the game scales, you can actually effectively do one monster versus 5 players, and without ads, and even without, like, the action economy doesn't beat them because they're that much harder to hit, and the way the math was done was very tight. So you can actually have a tight encounter with one big monster versus 5 players, and it's a tough fight. And it's one of the few games that consistently does that. You need teamwork to win. And we were having a fight the other day on... The GM was running a first ed module that somebody had an unofficial person had converted to second ed. And 3 rounds into the fight, myself and one other player are very mechanically savvy, and we said, GM, this guy is too hard to kill. I don't know how they've designed him, but he feels like he's a level 20 bad guy. And the GM says he is. He said, okay, we're level 17, and he's got 2 level 16 ads. That puts the encounter budget at 240 XP, which is 40 off the scale. This guy's too hard to fight, and his action economy stuff is killing us. He's got no weaknesses as far as you can tell. This person has taken the NPC generation and has picked extreme or high values for every stat. This guy is off the budget. We're losing because of that. And that was the reason we just couldn't hit him. We couldn't, and when we hit him, we didn't do much damage. He had a basically DR against everything and high hit points. I was like, he's too tough. And mid-combat, the GM had to nerf him. So the reason I would take out some of the GM choice initially is that designing a monster like that can be very tricky. It's very easy to get it wrong. So mid-combat, we had to nerf him because we were like, so we can't beat him. And the reason we can't beat him is the person who designed him didn't get the numbers right. And that was a real factor for us.
How old is Pathfinder 2 now? 3 years? 4 years?
4 years? 3-4 years.
And we're on Bestiary 3?
Yeah. And they've got
So
better
it's like
at some stuff with it, you know?
It's not beyond the realms that you could have, okay, well, here's a bestiary, and then they just put it in another bestiary and another bestiary, you know, and they could have, like, generate your own guidelines. But,
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, putting out bestiaries, and this is also where the online community can come in as well, because people will put up their own monsters and go, this is my... You know, I read through Slavic folklore, and here is this Vodnik guy who lives in rivers and captures people's souls underneath teacups. You know, I've started him up. Go nuts.
August 2019, so basically 2 3/4 years now.
Yeah, and we're on Bestiary 3. You know, Bestiary 1 obviously came out published, and then I guess if you say one Bestiary a year thereafter. You know, it's coming up with monsters necessarily isn't that bad for a design team, because I think with them what often happens is that they obviously they pad out some more stuff, but then anytime a monster goes into a campaign book, then you can stick it in the next bestiary, you know.
I mean, if you were in this hypothetical Souls RPG going to rely on that kind of model where the production company is going to provide all the bestiary content that you could possibly need, that's fine, but that's also sort of cutting off a certain aspect.
They've got robust design stuff in Pathfinder 2, just the person didn't obey the rules. They stuck the sliders to maximum on everything.
I played a chunk of the society stuff, and most of the games are designed for 4 players, and then there's rules for having about 5 and 6 players, and you can clearly see where somebody knows the rules inside out, and they say this is what you do when the average party level adds up to this. This is what you do when the average party level adds up to that, and then other people are just like, yeah, add in an extra mook.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't work. But the numbers-based one is often far more, even though it might be a bit more work on the GM, because you have to calculate everything out, and then, you know, with your stats and all that, it's a little more work for the GM, but it tends to make for a much more challenging encounter.
Just think of something. I remember many moons ago, Inquest magazine had a solo thing where you could play Magic the Gathering against yourself. Well, and they called it like Deep Blue or Deep Paper or something like that, because that was topical at the time. And it was, you know, there was a certain amount of randomness there, but basically the AI, let's call it that, got stronger over time and was able to start pulling out effects like destroys all land, destroys your highest creature, that sort of thing. And just from a point of view of creating like a Dark Souls RPG fight, something like that, has its, you know, like could be useful as a source of inspiration. As in, how do you create stuff that makes it interesting for solo players? It's another vein to tap into, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is, because
like you could play it solo if you wanted. You go, yeah, I fought that boss solo. I fought that boss solo. Yeah, it's doable. You know, that would be an interesting way to do the game, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. You just put the deck out and you can fight the boss solo if you want. You can practice at home.
And with sliders for more than one player, like depending what your target party size is, it might be one. It might be.
I know.
For the class experience, 1 player. But if you want the party, go nuts. Here's rules of to 6 players. How to make and the boss will grow extra arms or what have you.
I know there were certain Sentinels of the Multiverse characters where if you ignored the 3-player minimum or whatever, the math would just snap on them and they would be completely busted, and you could just solo them with one of the starting heroes very easily. So that is another aspect to it. I wanted to come back to the point on what skills we're testing, because you could also argue that maybe some players would want there to be a test of role-playing skills. Like, to use an example from Dark Souls, there's an awful lot of NPCs there who, if you play your cards right, will help you out, but they also have their own weird quests that they're on or objectives to do, and it can be very hard to interpret what they're saying, what they actually want. But if you play it right, you can get a big advantage or end up with an extra enemy at a critical moment. So if you have the right mindset behind it, you could have a setup where you're also testing people's role-playing skills when they meet these NPCs and have to figure out, well, what does this guy want? What will affect him? If I go off and steal the thing he's looking for before he gets there, will that make him mad, or will actually get rid of his obsession, or
I like
something
that.
like that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's fundamental to what we have at role playing, like, you know.
Yeah.
It would be far more engaging than, I roll my diplomacy skill to bamboozle the town guard or whatever. Like, even like you could actually have some like maybe not as intense as the boss battles, but flowcharts or bullet points of what this NPC cares about, how they react. You could make it you could make effectively a boss battle that's purely a social encounter. Deus Ex Human Revolution has something like that, where you're basically trying to convince somebody to back down or to give you information, and that like they'll bring up arguments, you'll bring up arguments. Like, I think there's absolutely something you could do there.
Yeah, you could do a web map with like point scoring on it effectively, where it's okay, this is the guy's starting position, this is his end resolution position, and depending on what you do with the 6 nodes that come off at 6 different decision points or whatever, you'll alter his end path. Like, which ones did you do? You did those 3, you didn't do those 2, you screwed him over in the 6th one, okay, he goes down to this resolution. But again, that's game design work. That's okay. You need to provide examples of how this works, sample ones for a GM to look at, and then for a GM to kind of put together their own ideas. And that'd be great stuff. Great content, great gameable content, but it's work. It's work for either the designers, who are the ones who want to be selling you stuff, or it's work for the GM. And that's maybe where the GM work is, and this one, there's a lot of prep going into it. It's like, okay, I have to prep a lot of stuff before I run this. Oh, wow, that's a lovely looking box set with all this stuff already being sold for €60. I think I'll just buy that, and that'll take care of 10 sessions of play. Excellent. And that's how you sell people stuff, lads. Let's make life easy for you. Here you go.
And getting the reputation as the hardest RPG.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a draw. There's absolutely players and GMs who'd run for that, like let alone the Dark Souls trademark.
There is one other thing I wanted to go over, and this is maybe getting a little away from the central boss based nature. It's like, but there is an element that I think is important to Souls-like, is the let's come back and do this later, and let's go down one of the other 3 paths we found by stabbing all the walls and such. There's Dark Souls is, the boss battles are the linchpins and the gates between the content, but there is, in most situations of Dark Souls, you will have a few options of side areas you can go to, and more things you can find. You'll get some XP souls that you can bank if you play carefully, but often the real advantage is you'll find more equipment, you'll find more spells, you'll fight different enemies, which can help hone your skills for but also you maybe find some of those NPCs and the things that they want, quest items. I know there's one boss in Bloodborne where you can actually just find a way to stun him by, if you talk to the right NPCs, go to a very specific location, and put the clues together as this like the connection between this item, which you have to read the lore on it and such. But if you do it right, you can actually stun the boss mid battle and get free hits in, and there's all kinds of little things like that. So how much of that sort of prep work that there's another skill contest is sort of the prep work
I
thing
have
there.
had an amusing discussion with somebody who was giving out about the Witcher 3 being too hard, and it's like, well, I mean, if you read the journal entries, it'll pretty much tell you how to beat all the bad guys, and then you just like use that type of weapon and maybe use that type of oil, or take this type of potion beforehand, and then okay, there mightn't be a cakewalk, but you'll manage to beat them. And they were like, "Oh, I'm not doing that."
I think that's one of the big things about the Dark Souls experience is that some people will rush in and try to Twitch gameplay their way past and just, count the iframes or whatever they do.
Roll.
Yeah, just roll like a madman. But Dark Souls really does reward that sort of slow, deliberate play where you're observant. You hone your skills on the less enemies. You find out which weapons work best in which situations, what tricks you can pull off with the various spells you do, and use that to increase your bag of tricks when you actually get to the boss. And I think that's an element you've gone to. Is there is a certain level of, if you play your card card, you can unbalance this boss through prep work. So that's another skill that you can put the emphasis on.
And if you're lazy, I'm sure there's a Reddit thread that'll tell you what to do, and then you just do that.
Well, there is that. There is the wiki element. I know I'm that terrible person who ruined my game by reading the wiki too many times. But
even with a wiki, you still need to be able to execute the plan. You can have it explained to you, this is what you need to do. Go in and still lose, and that's where Git Gud comes in. It's like, no, you know what to do. What you need to do is execute it better. You're currently just too much wasted movement. You're wasting too much time. You're not positioning yourself correctly for this strategy. You've got to practice that bit, and that's the Git Good end of it.
I think you're going to need a certain group as well, because I've played even Pathfinder and D&D with people, and it's like, okay, guys, this is the strategy. If anybody breaks out of this group, you're dead. There's one classic encounter from one classic module where you're in a cornfield full of ghouls, and it's like, right, guys, reach weapons back to back. Anybody steps out of this, you're dead. Cue the rogue going tumbling out to get a sneak attack, and you're like, ah!
This fascinates me because I think this is the RPG. Just let's get 6 random people to play here. No, chosen. I was going to say chosen men, like from Sharp, but it's
chosen few.
Motion.
This is not. This is absolutely resilience, ability to take a drubbing and then go. I'm going to push all my rage down into a little ball, concentrate it, and release it when we beat the guy. It'll.
I'm sure it applies to everything else as well, but I know when I used to do a lot of scuba diving, it was plan to dive, dive to plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the Dark Souls RPG isn't just the Dark Souls of TTRPG design, it's also the Dark Souls of group dynamics.
Absolutely. You can't have someone not paying it, because you imagine, okay, those 6 attacks come in, I'm going to outreach this one, you've got to parry that one, you've got to block that one, and so on. I'll just play a card at random.
If you want to be a real jerk, if you wanted to really push people, and you could probably introduce a timer mechanic as well for how long people have to respond.
Here's how I do it. I play down a card as the boss, right? And that card has a value on it for speed, reach, damage, and probably parry, right? And they all have different values, and you can outreach it with your attack by effect. There's a couple of things that'll do that. You can outspeed it, but if you don't reach it, you've got to outspeed it to hit first and stuff. And your GM plays that, goes 1, 2, 3, too late. 1, next card, 1, 2, 3, too late. 1, that's the GM bit, because that is that keeps the pressure on. Next round, bam, 1, 2, 3, too late. 1, 2. High pressure. Very high pressure. Gotta be careful. On the cards,
make it very clear how much damage you've just taken, any other effects, and once you get, maybe not even have, maybe have a set amount of damage for characters. As in, you're not rolling for hit points, but you can take 10 hit points, and those attacks are doing 3 each, or 4 each, or what have you. You can make mistakes, but not too often.
I guess that would work with the general game as well, because when you see that big batter up coming from the bad guy, if you don't take the appropriate dodging action, then it is splat.
Yeah. So you do it like that, and you make it so that the game and then you learn the fight. You're like, okay, first one I play scoop slam, grand. Second one I play triple thrust. Third one I play we got this.
I mean, talk about engagement though, because I suppose one idea that keeps cropping up with me lately is the focus shouldn't be so much on the amorphous fun, but engagement, because. Yeah. Characters could be having a terrible time, but players could be very invested and thinking, this is brilliant.
Like, this game requires everyone to be like, come on, guys, come on. Okay, 2 minutes, drink break, everyone get a coffee, you come back here, we're doing this. You know? All right.
Sharp focused.
Yeah. And GM, 5 minute timeout, we got to strategize. Okay, this guy's doing this. We're going to put you in chair 1, because both the high speed attacks are hitting chair 1. And then I'll do this one because he's hitting the sweep attacks there, and I can block the extra damage, and you do it like that. And basically, you might have to go, time out, we got to strategize for next round. We lose this fight, grand, we're dead, whatever. We wipe up, but we just go, right, okay, do that, grand. Next go, we go again. You know, and that's, that would be the game, and I think it will be a fun game, but it will be quite different to the way an RPG normally plays. And I think so. We've been talking about this for guts of an hour at this stage, so there's been some chat on this one.
For something I didn't think I could talk much about, I've talked quite a bit about it.
Yeah. Anyone got any final thoughts on this thing before I do my wrap up?
It's got to be very well thought out by the designers, by the GM, and by the players. Yeah,
I don't hold anything against the designer who goes for this challenge, realizes it's maybe too much for them, and then backs off and starts doing the sort of aesthetics thing, which is more about exploration and resource management than the amazing boss fight mechanics. I don't think that's wrong. Dark Souls is one of the most designed games series out there. People have been trying to, but From Software's games are designed to a crazy amount, and it's not an easy task. And because video games, TTRPGs are not as closed in as a video game system, so there's additional challenges there. So if you just want to say, we're in a grim, gritty world, you don't have many hit points, and if you manage to get past those ghouls over there, you'll get an extra halberd or something. I don't think, I'm not going to hold it against you to say that's the best Dark Souls I can do. And maybe your game will be cool. But to get that core experience where you're marrying setup and tactical play and all that stuff together, it's a big, hard thing to do. But like Dark Souls itself.
Absolutely. Liam?
No, I'll give it a go. The only thing I'd be wary about is if the scale goes too far, because consistent failure isn't fun. But it's kind of what you're signing up for in this case, But I guess there has to be that contract that it is winnable.
Absolutely. It needs to be very balanced. It needs to be ultimately very difficult but fair. It must be quick to resolve. I cannot think of a worse circumstance than having lost the fight and still be losing the fight an hour later. I want the lost fight and we start again. That's the key. Frustration sets in when you can't try again quickly. When you can try again quickly, is there anything worse? Anything people complain more than I have to spend 15 minutes getting to the boss fight again so he can kill me again so I get to get another go?
Well, that was the problem with the board game.
Exactly. And now I have to do all the fucking clearing again to get to the thing. And that was one of the things they changed when almost immediately someone came up with a fan patch to do this, and the guy said, oh yeah, try that. Half the number of souls everyone gets, and basically half the number of lives everybody gets, and it plays much better. That's probably something you should check in testing. Other suggestion I have is that if the Dark Souls RPG actually comes out from Steamforge, which should do in a little while, we might get that and have a go of it on the channel and see what people think.
On game.
Yeah. All right.
Sounds like something to try.
If your GM has multiply killed you in a questionably fair encounter, or you would like some more challenge out of your RPG, why not contact us on our social media or swing by our Discord? But for now, this party's over.
Thank you for listening to The Adventuring Party. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can head on over to SpeakPipe and drop us a line. Or you can join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or Twitter, or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license, but you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.